Hey, folks. Hopefully you're all seeing this. Let me actually double check. This is a very professional production we've got on here.
I like it. I have to say, I try and make it a thing that whenever a live stream starts, I try not to start off with, can everybody see this or not? Because I just have faith in the technology.
I think we're okay.
Yeah,
we're good. We're good. Yeah, cool. We're on YouTube. That's great. Like I said, it's a very professional production. So, quick introduction. Those who don't know me, and Stanley, AWS Servers Hero since 2019, been in service community for ages, helped run the service user group in London and serverless days and all these things. Happily joined by two esteemed colleagues. The only Brit lives in Australia. Mike Chambers, for those of you who don't know, Mike, I can let you introduce yourself quickly for 2 minutes. Mike.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so I'm also a hero with the AWS Hero program, but in the machine learning space. And so I do courses and train people up in machine learning and help people on a machine learning journey, and spend way too much of my time putting stuff up on YouTube and all that kind of stuff as well, having fun and taking liberties with AWS. So that's what I do.
Cool. Awesome. And definitely last but not least, the burning monk himself, Yan Cui. Dan, do you need to introduce yourself? You can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Yan. I guess I'm in AWS Serverless here as well. Been, I guess, mostly doing consulting work nowadays, and also doing some developer advocacy work with Lumigo, which I think still by far the best platform for serverless observability. So, hey.
Awesome. So let's get stuck into reInvent. We've got an hour. There's a lot to cover. So form of this discussion, I found a really good one-pager on all the announcements on reInvent on GitHub. I'm going to put it in the comments. So if you want to follow along there, if you just have a look at it, there's way too much to cover in that. So we want this to be an interactive session. If you've got any questions for Mark or Yan or myself, just ask us in the comments and we'll get on answering it. I know a few people asked a few questions about CDK, which we'll get to. There was a lot of CDK announcements. Well, actually one CDK announcement. That was quite big.
But a big one.
Yeah, there was a big one. And we're going to have a big discussion about CDK a little bit later. But if you have any questions about any of those announcements, ask us. So let's go back. reInvent 2019 was the last in-person reInvent. 2020 was a bit weird. It was online. This virtual platform that sort of worked, didn't work. Some things translated well to the virtual. Some things didn't really translate well. This year, back to in-person with some virtual bits. Overall impressions, how do you folks think it worked? We're all remote, as a remote consumer of it. Was it maybe an improvement on what we had before in 2019? Obviously, it's never going to be as good physically being in there. But like from a virtual experience, was it a better experience? I don't know. I think it was easier to follow from being afar. Or your thoughts about kind of the general feel of reInvent, this hybrid thing they had going? Good, bad, carry on doing it? Mark, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So it's an interesting question for me. Yes, 2020 was difficult for me because being in Australian time zone, there were things that were put on during the day, but it was all about whether people actually could take the time away from their day job to actually spend time interacting with stuff from reInvent. And I didn't. And so I spent a lot of time in meetings and customer meetings and all that kind of stuff. And so, I had to sort of like follow what was going on outside of that discussion. So in the evening time, everybody's asleep. Or everybody's just about starting to wake up in Vegas. So you don't get to see the stuff in real time. And the stuff that they rebroadcast for us over here was often when most people couldn't attend anyway. So that was difficult. I suppose in many ways that was exactly the same this year. But for me personally, I made that decision. I blocked out the entire week and I just did reInvent. I mean, normally speaking, I would go to reInvent. I would enjoy reInvent. I'd do it. So I was like, fine, I'm doing that now. It's going to mean that I have clocks up on the wall that show different time zones, and I'm just going to have to do this. And so, I got up twice at 2:20 in the morning, and I realized that most people wouldn't want to do that. But I did. And as a result, I ended up having a really good reInvent, a really well-connected reInvent. Obviously, I had slightly different motivation to a lot of people. We did live streams and stuff throughout the week, and that was super fun. And I connected with a bunch of people. For me, reInvent is about connecting with people. I still, even now we've gone past another reInvent, I still hold and maintain my record, which I'm not particularly trying to, but I've never been to a single reInvent session for any of the in-person or virtual ones I've ever been to. It's all about meeting people and listening to the announcements and talking about the announcements. So things like this is my reInvent, and I really enjoy it. So it was a good reInvent, but I will admit that it was a little different to most people's.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with one of the big value propositions reInvent is the networking aspect. And if you can still do that online, there's still definite value to be had. And there were definitely discussions happening, the Discord servers happening, all the live streams happening. So there was stuff still happening online. Yeah, and what are your thoughts about kind of participating in reInvent? I know you were kind of flat out. You were on the other end of that. You had a lot of work going on, trying to fit stuff in. Is it one of those things where you kind of have to dedicate time to it to really get the full value out of it? And then, or is it, can you still get a lot of value just going back after the sessions and catching up? How did you fit it in around your workday?
Yeah, I guess this year I'm kind of gone the opposite to Mike. Like last year, I spent a lot of time just watching the sessions, trying to catch them, maybe when they were happening or just straight afterwards. But this year, I'm just flat out with work right now, so I kind of missed pretty much all of it. I managed to catch up a few of the announcement blog posts and see what's been announced, and a few things that I saw on the Twitter and things like that, which was interesting. But I haven't been able to watch any of the sessions, sit down properly and watch them end to end yet. So I'm hoping to go through some of the recommended list. I think a few people have put out there, and just trying to go through the list of sessions and see if there's anything good.
Cool. Yeah. So, quick question for both of you now. So you both create content, you both create courses. What does reInvent do to your workload? Because you've got courses coming up now, you'll have to update everything. Do you spend the next month, 2 months just going, chuck everything out and start again? What does that look like for your workload? Start with you again, Mike.
So it is always, very, very nerve-wracking. Whenever they make a change to the console, particularly, and it looks different, and it's like all of a sudden you've got to do that. Whenever there's new services come out, I have two strategies with this. First of all, when I put my course content together, I do at least once in each course, I say, look, things do change, and knowing how AWS works under the hood is really important, not just knowing where the button is, because the button might move at some point. And so make sure that when you're learning something, you understand how it's actually working, so that you'll be able to adapt and flow as AWS changes. Because even if you're not watching this course, 6 months from now, you still need to be able to do the things that we're talking about in the course. Thankfully, though, for me, I concentrate at the moment mostly on certification courses. And so you sort of go with the certification cycle more than the new announcement cycle. What I do with the new announcements is have a lot of fun with them, like making videos about them and social media posts and that kind of stuff, which is just fun. So it's a little bit overwhelming because there's all this new stuff come in. There's a lot of AWS service teams that would like me to talk about their stuff, and there's lots of people that would like me to talk about some of the services. So there is a big tsunami of stuff, definitely. But you just have to pick one off at a time and see which one interests you the most and work with it. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So you kind of pragmatic about it and kind of
you have to be, otherwise you're just going to disappear into a hole.
So yeah, let's go to you. So yeah, you've got your production ready serverless course, which we host on homeschool.dev. We normally have a course running every January. We've got another one this last January, 2021 January. So reInvent 2020, there was a ton of Lambda announcements, and the Lambda section of that course went from, I think, 30 minutes of content to about an hour and a half after over one reInvent. That was a bit mental because there were a lot of Lambda announcements last year. Not so many this year. Some important ones, but kind of smaller ones. What does that kind of update cycle look like for you in terms of all this new reInvent stuff? You got a new course coming out. You've got to update all of this as quickly as possible. How do you get on top of that?
Yeah, I think for the courses, especially the coding courses, they're really tough. Like Mike said, especially when you change consoles and you've got lessons on, oh, go to the console, click on this, and suddenly all the UI looks completely different. The button's not there anymore. And you're like, okay, God, not this again. But I think for the workshops that we run, those are a little bit better, just because a lot of them are around discussions, and I guess the challenge is there really more is just updating myself on all the new things and try them out, and then actually come up with practical reasons why you should do this or do that, so that you're not just reciting whatever they say in the blog post. Because I think the official information is good, but oftentimes they're not exactly they're for specific use cases. But for a lot of the people that takes your workshop and talks to you, they are coming from different contexts, and their use case is not necessarily the same as what the AWS services team envisions. So I mean, I try as much as I can. I try to use the service myself, get a feel for it as a real user, and then so that when people ask me, okay, should I use this in my situation, I can come up with something that's relevant for them.
Cool.
The blog posts tend to concentrate on the positive cases, right? They don't sort of like take you to the edge, and I think that's why your content is really valuable, so that people can see what the real world answer is about all this stuff. I did really quickly, but my favorite story in relation to these updates, I actually was in the United States a few years ago doing a sort of an actual physical training tour, going around to the campuses of this company doing serverless training, and each time we'd go around, we'd print out some material and we'd go and deliver some content. And as we went around doing that, the Lambda function, the Lambda service was changing. It was when the invocation model changed, and they had the proxy element to it that's obviously been there for ages now. And we were literally going back to the hotel room, rewriting the printout documentation, then going to Kinko's and getting more printed out. And as we went around, then step functions came out, I think, in the same time. It was fun. It was fun.
It's there's that whole thing. It's like where someone builds some sort of piece of custom tooling to solve a use case of theirs, and and they open source it a month before reInvent, and it becomes invalidated at the same time. So always good to have good relationships with your AWS account managers to figure out if you're wasting your time or you should just wait a little bit. So let's talk about some of the announcements. Hightour seems very excited about serverless Kafka. So Yan, we'll leave that to you. There are a couple of serverless announcements where everything serverless is the new black, so to speak. I was joking about saying Amazon Web Serverless. So everything seems to be serverless now. Everything's got a serverless form factor. So there was Kafka, Redshift, and Kinesis Streams serverless. What are your thoughts on those? Because are they really serverless?
Yeah, I guess if you followed who was it that said that the serverless is a spectrum?
It's Ben Keogh.
The Ben Keogh, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the new on-demand stuff that they're doing for Kinesis is definitely a step forward. Not as far as you would like in terms of the pricing being like Firehose, where you only pay for data usage and not also for for uptime as well. But at least you take away that need to work out provisioning or do some kind of auto scaling, which I've done a couple of times. So I think that's a big step forward in terms of making Kinesis a lot easier to use. I haven't actually tried Kafka myself, so I can't really speak too much about that. But it sounds like from the announcement, they're making it easier to auto provision a cluster and maybe some auto scaling as well. Is that somewhere they mentioned that there's some auto scaling factor in there?
Yeah, it's also scaling, auto provisioning. It's preview only at the moment, so I think you might need to be on a list or something, because I was looking for the console. I couldn't find it actually. So Hightour can answer that for us in the comments. And then the Kinesis bit is available now, so serverless Kinesis. Now, it does make your life easier, because if you're using Kinesis Streams, you were managing shards yourself. People really popular blog posts going through the different types of streaming options in AWS. You probably need to update that.
And I guess everyone used to just at least double the peak throughput in Kinesis, just because it's easier than to deal with the auto scaling. You have there's no auto scaling. You have to implement it yourself. I was talking to Wally, the Finnish broadcaster. Anna hit or something Anna hit, and she was telling me how they basically just work out, okay, yeah, our peak throughput is this amount, we just double that. It's just easier to overpay than to worry about scaling up and down and hitting those daily scaling limits and stuff like that. And yeah, this is going to make life so much easier for people. And I guess if they can make Kafka, if they're making Kafka servers as well. Okay, go on.
So, Mike, do you have much experience with Kinesis streams? Obviously, have you building a lot of data pipelines and that kind of things? How does this impact the data engineer's life out there?
I wouldn't necessarily want to peg myself as being a data engineer, because there are some probably watching who would say, "Hang on, he's not." But I think the key term that's just been used all throughout that last little discussion you were having there as well is it just makes it easier. And so what I'm interested here is to what this sort of, it lowers the barrier to entry to people developing some more sophisticated architectures who maybe at the moment they are the projects that they're putting together, they're very S3 centric, and they're just like shoving a whole bunch of data into S3 just by making normal API calls. They don't necessarily have the ability to scale that up particularly, and the barrier to entry to be able to go in and do all that sharding design and sort of build up those more complex architectures is tangible. It's like real. So now it's like, well, here is an easier way to get started, and I'm going to be really interested to see whether this is used by those people and people like me, frankly, to build up projects which is a little bit easier. I don't have to think about the detail of some of the configuration that I'd have to have thought about before. And then it provides a bit of an on-ramp for me to then say, actually, I want to take control here, and I want to start doing this more. So, you see other serverless offerings in the past. I was going to say serverless RDS. It had a bit of a rocky start. I'm not really sure how well it's recovered from that. So hopefully it doesn't sort of have those kinds of issues, but even then, even with that, it allowed people to create projects and say, I don't want to have to figure out how all of this works and how all of that provisioning works. I can just go and create the endpoint and off I go and do something. Actually, that's probably a bad example in some ways because it works a little bit differently too. But I like the idea of dropping the barrier to entry. And there were some other serverless announcements as well in the SageMaker space, and I think they did a similar kind of thing as well. It allowed people to iterate fast and be like that single person dev, just crank out the project really quickly. So I'm interested to see what people make of it.
Yeah, I think definitely there was a theme about making your life easier. They never explicitly called it out. I think maybe Werner or Adam could have been more explicit about it. But a lot of those announcements, Hi2LS has just mentioned in the comments, the S3 bucket ACL change was one of our favorites, and that's just about simplifying access management to data stored in S3. Just make that easy. There was there was an S3 to EventBridge integration announcement. Previously you had to do S3 to CloudTrail to EventBridge. Now you can just invoke EventBridge with S3 notifications. That's the quality of life improvements. It's a simple little thing. It's not going to allow you to do anything new, but it just makes what you can do easier. What was the other one? The Dynamodb filtering, or the streams filtering they've implemented in Lambda. So previously, folks would get like a Dynamodb stream as a big example. It's also Kinesis streams filtering as well. You'd have to invoke a Lambda for every single piece of data, and then kind of basically have an if statement or a case statement in that, deciding what you wanted to do with that data. Now you have basic filters, so you're not invoking a Lambda every time, and you can break it out to multiple Lambdas, and your logic becomes simpler. I think that was definitely was an underlying theme. And yeah, like, what are your thoughts about these kind of quality of life improvements? I think a lot of the announcements kind of fall into that category.
Yeah, I guess another one that I quite like was the Sqs Dlq Replay. So that's something that I've had to build custom tools. I don't know if you remember the Lumigo CLI. I built a command just so that we can replay events from DLQ back to the main queue. Again, this is something now you can just do in the console, which is still not quite as far as I would like to get to go. There are a lot of use cases where we want to redrive to a different account so that we can test the events, but keep them in the DLQ and things like that. But at least for very simple cases where you just want to replay them into the main queue, at least now you can do that in the console. And yeah, and I think definitely the theme this year seems to be just the quality of life improvement rather than the big fancy service announcements.
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
I mean, there were no that I can think of. There were no big underlying service announcements. It was almost like product teams had stayed home for the year because they were obviously at home, and sort of just written projects that were sort of on top of it, on top of things. I mean, even some of these serverless announcements, really, at the end of the day, it's just a different way of configuring the same infrastructure that's underneath. It's just now just done a whole bunch of that for you, right? And some of the other tooling around things like Canvas for machine learning, and the extensions to things like Studio. There's just so many things where it's really just some configuration tweaks to make it easier for everybody to use it, and they're welcome, right? They're welcome, but big toys are good too, right? You want one big present under the Christmas tree, and then lots of little things in your stocking.
Yeah, that's kind of because there were those kind of two no-code announcements. Is the Canvas for Sagemaker Studio, and then the Amplify Studio, which allows you to create web pages on the fly, within a studio and import things from Figma. What are your thoughts about adopting those things early? Like, generally, AWS like to release MVPs, and you want to maybe hold off for a little bit. Is there value to be had from it already? I know you've played with the Sagemaker Canvas. But can someone get value from it today, or there's still edges that need to be figured out?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? So first of all, I do see people, talking about both. Particularly Canvas. I've seen people talking about, no doubt, other services and other services too. And they sort of say, wouldn't it be great if it did this, this, and this? It's like, look, it literally got announced yesterday. AWS have pretty much never released a service that you then look at it and go, that's fantastic, that's all I ever wanted, and I don't want any more than that. So it's all of these things are iteration one of a new service or a new slant on a service. So let's take it for what it is, and then provide feedback and provide useful feedback to AWS so that they can iterate on them. All of these things have to be hit on and hammered on, and we have to play around with them. I wouldn't be immediately throwing it into a production pipeline, because you need to understand from for example, Canvas. It's designed for, so this is Sagemaker Canvas. It sort of abstracts you away from SageMaker, which is weird because SageMaker extracts you away from other things. But it allows someone like a data scientist to say, okay, well, or a domain expert in data to say, I've got this data, I understand what it is, I'm going to put it into this machine learning tool, and it's magically going to make me a model. And more or less, that's what it'll do, caveat, and there's only a certain number of ways that it'll do that. I think what you need to do first is we need to get the machine learning engineers to sort of have a go with it. Some of them are going to complain about it, but we're going to sort of tell them to sort of calm down, have a look at it, see what it does, and then go present that to those domain experts and say, here's an entry point you can use, and I'm available to sort of be on the other side of it, and I'll take the workload away once you've sort of put it in there, and I will go and take it and productionize it. So that I think both ends of the spectrum needs to understand how it works. If you just end up with the domain experts throwing data in there, pressing buttons frequently, and producing lots of work, it's not going to go anywhere unless there's that other part of the equation sort of working with you, with the other disciplines working with you. The one thing I will say about Canvas, and I was warned about this, but I didn't hear it until afterwards, is it is actually quite expensive to play around with. So just be aware of that if you're having to go with it yourself. It is essentially it's a different view on SageMaker Studio. It is the same tool. It's actually the same service, just a different view on the front of that. That's fine. I like that. But, that's not necessarily the cheapest thing in the world. And I clicked around with one demo data set, which is not that big. It's a few thousand lines long. It's one that data scientists and machine learning engineers use all day, every day, just to test things out. I ended up with a bill of $157, and that was just on 3 tests. And I considered them to be I now understand a little bit about what that looks like. If I hadn't have checked that, I could have an enormous bill come the end of the month. So yes, fun toys. Check on some of the pricing of these things and make sure you've got good alerts in place.
Okay, definitely be careful. So let's segue to the other kind of no code announcement was Amplify Studio. And then the other thing with Amplify, there was also a pre-event announcement with Amplify, which I saw Yan, you were kind of excited about. It was the escape hatches. So obviously Amplify tries to abstract away a lot of the complexity of AWS, which is great at some level, but there's a point where you hit the limits of what you can do with Amplify. And then how do you go beyond that? And I saw Yan, I think, sure, as you tweeted about, escape hatches where you can export stuff into CDK now, potentially solving that problem. What are your thoughts on that kind of, Amplify now being able to export configs into CDK? Does that solve the problem around, starting something, Amplify and then outgrowing it and being stuck?
Yeah, I was talking to someone else on a different stream recently, and he pointed out that it's not as good as it looks because it doesn't output you've got this cognitive user pool, you got this identity pool, you got this Lambda function, all of that. Instead, it's just one opaque package with a bunch of configuration options. So you're kind of still bound by whatever configuration points you had before. So it's not like you can now just get the exact resources that you had before, but configure into a CDK constructs instead. But you just get this overarching big thing, this opaque thing that you can't really quite pick apart easily. But they also say they're allowing you to customize resources. So I need to play around with that and see how well that works. Maybe that's the better escape hatch compared to this exporting to CDK. If the CDK route is quite as limited as what I found out from Adrian.
Yeah, it could be one of those things where it's basically it's the very first version of that, and with a feedback loop, it will improve. And that's how. But also, CDK is evolving. CDK is what, 2 and a bit years old now. So it is evolving. So let's start talking about CDK. So I think we all have opinions on CDK. Mine have changed recently. Matt Coulter from Liberty Mutual got up and talked about how CDK was transformative for Liberty IT. It helped power their adoption of serverless and AWS and all these things, and got huge value out of it. But there are dangers to CDK too. I know someone like Ben Keogh is very, very vocal about adopting CDK because you need to understand those trade-offs. Let's go to Mike first. What are your thoughts on the evolution of CDK and where it is today? Is it something you recommend? What are your warnings? What are your thoughts?
So I'll preface all of this with I don't actively use CDK, but I've made a choice to not actively use CDK, so that is somewhat relevant. I am quite captivated by Ben Keogh's thoughts on this as well, and I do talk to him frequently about this because I'm interested in it. The thing I thought was quite interesting is you're talking about Amplify there and how Amplify's got escape hatches. It's got this ability to be able to sort of take you from Amplify to something else. Now, and it might not be perfect, but it's at least got that notion in the service that once you've sort of got up and running and you're working with some services, you've got at least the notion of being able to sort of like spring out of that and go and take more direct control over what you're doing potentially, or customize it specifically to do what you wanted to do. And most projects that sort of start off, if they're going to become large scale, very successful projects, then they'll probably want to do that eventually. CDK, it solves a problem. I'm not convinced necessarily it solves the problem in the right way. I think it's interesting that AWS are doing this as opposed to somewhere else in the community. And obviously there are other places in the community that are doing things like this. And I'd kind of like to see those projects maybe bolstered a little bit more. Honestly, I think the issues that CDK seems to solve, such as procedurally being able to create these templates, because that's what it's doing, even though some people using CDK might not sort of see it in that way. Maybe there are other ways that we can look at that, and we can solve those through putting some time and effort into, or more time and effort, because it's already got time and effort into Cloud Formation, for example, and saying, okay, well, this is the direction we want to go here. This is how we're going to actually have configuration management in our platform. So I'm cautious with CDK. I think that if you, my analogy, and I'll be brief on this, I hope, my analogy here is about digging holes. not because digging holes are a bad thing, but like you start off digging holes as a little kid. You're on a beach, you got your hands in the sand, and you're digging holes. You understand the notion of digging holes. You can only dig a hole to a certain size. The sand starts piling in, the water gets in the bottom. We've all been there. We all understand what that's like. We grow up a little bit, we grab a spade and we start digging holes in the backyard or our garden. We understand, we know what we're doing here. We can see it's very tangible. But, you can go up this scale. You can start getting into a mechanical digger. You can go ultimately to a massive mine site, and you can be in one of these trucks, which is the size of, several houses, digging holes. You wouldn't be in that truck digging massive holes unless you got that experience that you'd come through from right back at the very beginning of understanding what hole digging is all about. What am I trying to say? It's very convoluted, but if you know what you're doing already, you know what Cloud Formation does, and you then understand the mapping to CDK, then okay, in other words, you've got that experience of being with getting your hands dirty and you actually understand, then okay, CDK is going to let you get really rapidly. It's going to get you to deploy infrastructure, but you understand what's going on. Where I get nervous is where the first thing you ever do in AWS in any serious capacity for infrastructure as code is you start looking at CDK and you have no idea what's happening behind the scenes. That's where I start to get a bit nervous. So I have no specific thoughts on new versions of CDK and stuff, but that's a quick. I'll stop now.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on CDK from that side? I'll share my 2 cents at the end. But what are your thoughts about it?
Very much what Mike said in terms of if you try to automate. I think the thing that went on the Twitter for a bit, it was this whole 15,000 lines of code to 14 lines of code. But if you don't understand what's going on behind that 14 lines of code, then you can't debug problems. You're going to be really stuck. And we see this time again with people that are using tools that abstract away the cloud so much that all you see is something from amplify commands, like 4 lines of amplify command. Great, but then you have no idea what amplify has done for you. So if you need to do anything or you find problems, you're stuck. And so that's probably not a great place to be. But I guess in the Liberty Mutual's case, those 14,990 or 86 lines of code, those are all stuff that they've written internally. So they do have internal expertise. So hopefully for them, even if someone who doesn't understand what's actually going on, they at least know the right person. They can reach out and say, "Hey Matt, what the hell is going on with this thing you just given me?" So hopefully for them, it's not that bad. But when you start using community shared resources, then you might get a bit nervous. And I guess the other side of it, I think, is that CDK is great if you're working in an environment where, like I think with Liberty Mutual, everyone is agreed that we're going to use the TypeScript or whatever to write our CDK. But the notion that you can write infrastructure as code using general purpose language opens up the door to environments where you've got microservices, which encourage people to use the right tool for the job, which means if I like Python, I'm going to write my stuff in Python. So if I'm going to write stuff in CDK, I'm going to write it in Python. And then versus the team next door is going to be using JavaScript. So from a sharing point of view, that becomes, well, who's going to share anything, because they all been done in different languages. And if you've got some kind of a governance team that needs to double check and to provide guidance and guardrails around what goes into these packages that people are sharing, these patterns are sharing, are they following best practices and whatnot, then that team becomes quite difficult it becomes quite hard to do their job, because now they have to understand CDK packages written in 4 different languages. So if you're not really, if you can't get everyone to agree on the same page in terms of what language to use for CDK, then you have all the problem that comes with general purpose language. Whereas I think one of the key points that Ben makes is that at least with YAML, everyone have to agree on the same language, the same syntax. If you and I write the same infrastructure, we're going to be writing the same YAML. That being said, I do still see like the power of CDK, and I do think there's been several attempts to make those kind of making reusable modules at the CloudFormation level easier, but they're just not been executed very well. I mean, you've got the service application repository, which kind of what they try to do with the whole, write your custom template, and then you can provide the parameter points, and then you can share them easily either within the organization or just publicly. but it's just not had this kind of level of adoption that we need to push it forward. I guess another thing about a CDK, I think, is that it just and it opens up to kind of the kind of expression. Well, anything that you can abuse, people is going to do it, and I think you're going to see CDK packages that are way more expressive than it really needs to be. And I like my infrastructure as code decorative and not a bunch of for loops that I need to parse and understand what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think that's the one trade-off, is the imperative versus the declarative trade-offs. We know a lot of folks are very big fans of both approaches, and they both do have their trade-offs around that. I always look at the HTML/JavaScript debate on the front end. How much do you use the platform? Okay, use HTML, a declarative language, to define what your web page looks like, and how much do you use JavaScript to call the APIs to define it? And there's big debates in the front end world around, you should just use the platform versus JavaScript, and it's not at the same scale. It's very different, but it is that trade-off between the two, because you can make a lot of mistakes, but you can also, it gives you extensibility and flexibility. One of the most important things, what happens in the web, though, is stuff that gets implemented in JavaScript often gets backported into HTML. So something like lazy loading of images is now a feature of the HTML of the web platform. And that would used to be something you'd implement in JavaScript where you lazy load images. And now it's actually just a feature or one browser supported. And to your point, Mark, like maybe that's what they should be doing with CDK and with Cloud Formation, is going like, hey, now we've got all these constructs, all these libraries, and they'll be able to see what people are using. And maybe they should be backporting that as a feature of Cloud Formation instead of having this abstraction over it. Like there's this tendency, like let's just put an abstraction to fix the problem, or add this feature. Why don't you actually add the feature back into the core of the core service that's built on top of? Like that would be the ideal solution. But I don't know what's happening inside AWS and how they think about these things.
So I think, for me, when you look at AWS, and I think trying to understand how AWS works, it's potentially futile, but also no, you can do it. Like they have, let's just say they've still got two pizza teams. They've got small teams that work on projects. They're given fair autonomy to go and just do something. So Cloud Formation is a bit like that. It's a little bit different because obviously it touches every single service, but the underlying core of Cloud Formation is a team, as far as I'm aware. A lot of other teams doing other things. Yes, you end up with different teams competing against each other seemingly, and you get things like Secrets Manager and Parameter Store being released at very similar times to do very similar things. And it's easy for us to sort of like go, oh man, they don't know what they're doing, what's going on. But as soon as you can kind of step back and say, actually, AWS is a collection of teams all doing awesome things, pick and choose the ones you want, support the ones you want, and they're the ones that are going to flourish. There are also other good things about working with AWS as compared to other providers as well, which are really beneficial. So as soon as you can sort of see that and unlock that, then I think that gives you your AWS superpower, because you go, actually, I'm going to stop wasting any cycles on worrying about how AWS works, and I'm just going to pick these things, and I'm just going to accelerate, and they're just going to like rush forward. Now we look at CDK and Cloud Formation, and there's just something is a little different here, because CDK is getting a lot of attention and a lot of airtime, and it never was a product team in the first place, right? It was a development effort off the back of something that was happening somewhere, and someone, from recollection, and I'm going to get this wrong and maybe pick me up on this, but it was someone working in like an Alexa team or something like that, or something like that. And they saw that need for the standardized deployments, and they were Python developers. And so they're like, right, let's do this. And they started writing CDK. I think that's the genesis story. Apologies if it's wrong. It was something like that. And so it never came from that initial customer need necessarily. It came from internal need, and my argument there is that point right there in history is where there should have been sort of this feedback given to the Cloud Formation team. It's like, you're killing us here by not having this. We need to develop this in this direction. You need to help us out here. And I think they are doing things, but they didn't get any airtime as far as I can recall at reInvent this year. CDK did. It's become a thing. It's gotten into the marketing areas of AWS as well. So marketers see it as like a really easy adoption, really easy to like get people to use AWS. And it's getting a life of its own, maybe a little bit more than maybe it should. And I think that I'd really like to see that feedback going more directly to CloudFormation. There are some real opportunities here for you to make some changes. They have an enormous job to do, right? So all of the cycles that we're spending on this, let's give some love to CloudFormation.
Yeah. I think in general, so if you're using AWS in production, a service isn't released until there's CloudFormation available for it.
That's right.
That's the trigger for you to actually start using a service. Can I define this thing in CloudFormation? So yeah, you definitely have to give them some love.
Yes.
On that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shout out to Vlad, by the way. He's shouting out periodically. And I can hear him in the back of my mind wooting in the comments. Just don't woot too loud, Vlad. You know what happens then.
So we've got one extra special guest tonight. Who's going to join us, who basically I'm DM'd about an hour ago saying, hey, do you want to jump on this thing? I'm going to add her, Farah Campbell herself. Thanks for jumping on at short notice.
Hey, Farah.
Hey, it's good to see everybody. I missed you all at reInvent this year, and please apologize. You can still see that my voice is struggling just a little bit, but I definitely wanted to come on and say hello. And I'm really curious for you guys. You attended reInvent in the past. We all attended virtually last year. So I'm just curious, how was it, attending in the hybrid model that we had this year?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this up front, actually. Maybe I should have said that for now. I think we all had very different experiences. Mark, you're in Australia. You want to quickly give Farah some feedback?
So my recap of that briefly. I put a lot of extreme effort into it because I'm a little unhinged. I was awake very early. I basically did Vegas time, but from Australia. Most people, granted, wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. And if they did, they probably shouldn't have done that, and sort of caught up with things during the day. I think the big thing for when you're attending reInvent virtually is making time for reInvents. And normally you would go. And so obviously that is making a huge amount of time available to the session. When people are not attending and attending virtually, rather, it's persuading the organizations they work for to allow them to take the time to actually watch the streams during the day and all that kind of stuff. And so I blocked out my entire week and did that. I think the people that managed to do it successfully remotely did that. We're in a little bit of an oddball for a time zone kind of situation in Australia. Yes, things are streamed during the day, but as in restreamed during the day, but you only really get to watch those if you've got the time to do it. And then in the evenings, everybody else in the world seems to be kind of asleep, so you don't get to follow so much.
I remember having that same experience last year. It felt like, we're trying to attend reInvent for 3 weeks, but also you're still sitting at your desk and there's work to be done, and then you're at home and the kids need something, and then you have a friend that's texting you, are you available to help? So it really is hard to set aside a time to experience reInvent and to take it all on without being there. But it is good that, we were, I do hope that some were able to enjoy it and participate and feel like they were there.
Absolutely. And I big shout out, as you mentioned then, to my family for putting up with me for the whole of last week, being in very strange time zone and no doubt not being very coherent ever.
Yeah, I think for me, it was like the time zone here in the UK and Europe, it was kind of dinner time effectively. And I've got 2 young kids now. And it was a bit crazy, like basically kind of feeding children, watching reInvent on my laptop, watching the keynotes on my laptop, trying to explain to my wife, like, oh, I got this keynote starting. And when it was the 3rd day in a row of keynotes, she was like, not again. Like, she thought it'd be one, and then explained it's like over 2 hours long. And yeah, that's kind of the only things I really did live. Everything else, like I watched a few stuff like retroactively. It was okay. It was fine. Like it was definitely not as intense as a fully virtual one. I think myself and Vlad had drinks the one night on Zoom, just for old time's sake. But yeah, it was a lot more from the virtual side, like maybe a 10th of like, or a 5th of the kind of interactivity as we had from 2020. And what were your thoughts on the whole virtual side? You said you were very chilled. You were very busy doing non-reInvent stuff.
Yeah, I was fully flat out with work. I'm still am, so I've just been having end-to-end meetings for the whole day. So it's still trying to find time to catch up on all the sessions that I missed. But I think I managed to catch up on all the announcements, at least read all the announcement blog posts. So at least I caught up on what got released.
Cool.
What was your favorite announcement? What was your favorite announcement?
Yeah, mine was the Kinesis, the on-demand thing, because that's something that's been bugging me for a long time.
Definitely. So, Farah, one of the things I want to talk to you is you had Dance Revolution in the, like, what did you do? Because you're now in modern apps at AWS, you were at Stacker, you've joined AWS, you're now in the kind of marketing side doing modern applications, worrying about community, you're working a lot with the heroes as well. What was it like being in person at reInvent this year? And, what was your little kind of serverless container hero area like? What did you have going for people?
Okay, so I had a lot going on for not only for like the heroes, but also for our internal product teams and, customers. So yes, this was the first time we had a containers and serverless zone. So we had, experts from across the org there that were able to, talk to customers. And that was actually really, really cool because you'd have one customer talking to somebody about something that had to do with, ECS. And then they, moved over to more questions about Lambda and, you'd see the DA say, hey, let me go grab Emily, she's standing over there and she can come help with Lambda, so that was actually really, really cool to, have that experience. We had serverless office hours, live streaming daily, which was awesome. DRR, David Richardson, the VP of Lambda, came over. We had a Dance Revolution machine. And that's just really to help keep the energy alive. We had a claw machine going and I thought it was really fun to be able to live stream. I wanted to do that there like in public. So, people that were watching the live streams could kind of get the feel of what it was like to be at reInvent. I'm not sure if you saw this, but we had Sam the Squirrel. So Eric Johnson and Matt Bonig both put on the costumes and they had a little dance off, which was so much fun. But yeah, we had so much going on with community this time. We had in the dev lounge, there was a number of our community builders and heroes that were presenting. We had a number of our heroes and community builders presenting their OSS projects at the OSS kiosk. We had meetups in the heroes lounge. So really this year it was awesome to just kind of like watch more community driven efforts and trying to bring the community into more of these conversations. I really enjoyed that. It was great at the replay. Adam, our new CEO, stopped by and we got to say hi to him. And so the heroes got to meet him. So yeah, I really just feel like this year I just feel like there were so many people that needed that connection, that had been missed out on. I know I needed it, right? Like, even though I'm exhausted, like my mind is spinning on the thousands of things that, we could do to, help enable more communities, to build on top of AWS. So, and you just figure out more, you just learn more ways that you can help one another. So anyhow, it was really, really good to be there. Like my heart needed it, but I am exhausted. And I also feel bad too, because it's hard when you're on site to connect with the outside world because there's just so much happening. So I do apologize to the heroes that were virtually that I wasn't able to connect with and, stay on top of the whole time. So.
Those serverless office hours that were live, are those going to be available on YouTube anyway? Because we know all the other sessions are, but those kind of chats are really, really useful. Those going to be available on YouTube?
Yeah, they'll be at serverlessland.com. You can find them there. Yeah, those are great sessions. We also had Matt Coulter and Matthew and a few other of our heroes come on and talk about different projects. So it was really, really awesome.
Cool. I remember in 2019, Ant, you and I were sat down with somebody else who's not present, so that we'll just call them B. They were we were sort of recapping what was happening and what the announcements were, and they were like, "Oh, it's every." By the way, they are a serverless hero, so that sort of doesn't narrow it down too much, does it? And they were like, "Oh, there's all these containers. That's what they're talking about. They don't talk about serverless this year. What's going on?" And so I saw this year the containers and serverless zone being together, and I really like that. Helping that community come together. I in my mind, it was like the bikers and the mods, like in and like they were like on opposite sides of the room to start with, and they were like eyeing each other off. But by the end of the reInvent, I'm sure that they were all together, hugging it out and coming together. So I liked that zone was together. I thought that was a good move.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is. We're all working together to help our customers, and I would say most of our customers are using both. So it is good to to bring the conversations together, and I think it was beneficial for our customers, and so I'm hoping to hear feedback at some point that it was, but I'm sure I'll get that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very rare to see. Unless it's a greenfield environment, it's very rare to see 100% serverless environment. The real world is containers plus serverless. Fargate's a great option. On that, and loads of folks adopting it. So you've got your serverless containers, and it's that whole spectrum. So yeah, and that's how modern applications are getting built. So let's go. So in terms of, I suppose you can't. In terms of Lambda, like for the next year. Or not even Lambda, serverless for the next year. This Mark, Yan, Farah, any of you can answer this. What do you see, like out of all the announcements, what do you see people actually using? What do you see the thing that's going to make a difference to people? And, what are the kind of trends? So look at the pre-event announcements and what's happened. Like, where do you see we are with serverless? Have we reached that tipping point where it's going to take off? And personally, I think we have. But what do you see with this kind of serverless space for 2022? Yeah, that's it. Cool. Yan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly from my sort of perspective, it has been picked up quite a bit in the last 18 months. Just judging by how many people are actually, are not just interested in serverless, but actually actively seeking help in succeeding with serverless in the organization. There's been a lot of large companies that has kind of somewhat adopted a serverless first mentality in terms of how they approach problem solving. That's good to see, but I still think there's a lot of ground to make, because we are only talking about a few maybe big companies, but lots of small and medium companies are going fully serverless. But I think for the large enterprises, it's going to be a long time, because that's just how long it takes things happen in those large enterprises, and paradigm shifts are particularly difficult. You can't just it's not just about the solution itself, but it's about your people. You've got all these thousands of engineers that need to get retrained and taught how to use AWS, because when using serverless, you have to learn to use AWS, and that is a lot of effort for people that are coming new to the space.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's always the big kind of barrier to entry, is like learning AWS, which is why some of these announcements, making things easier, might help in that. Mike, what are your thoughts about the coming 2022?
I actually think this is a pivotal year. I think this is a really important year in terms of serverless. It has been my humble opinion that serverless several years ago is just the way that cloud should work and works. But really, it started out with things like Lambda, with backend as a service and function as a service, and tying together these essentially microservices into amazing architectures. What we've just seen continued at reInvent here is the removal of configuration from existing services and called serverless. It deserves to be called serverless. I don't have any problem with that, but it is basically it is the same as, more or less, the existing service. It's just now the configuration has gone away, and so I'm concerned, but there's also this opportunity to make sure that we get this right this year, that when new people arrive to serverless, they don't just see it as I don't have to configure things that I used to have to configure, because the architectures are different. The opportunities are big. The opportunities are different in terms of how we actually architecture these services. So it's really important this year that we keep the original story of what serverless is alive, and help people who are coming along and saying, oh, now Kinesis is serverless, it just makes my job easier, but everything else in my stack will remain the same. So, well, okay, well, just make sure that you understand what serverless is, because, hey, there's this way that we architecture things in this world, and you're going to really enjoy it, but come on this journey with us and see how you can start to plan to refactor things. New things can be developed with Lambda functions and with event-driven architectures and all that kind of stuff. Welcome all these new people in. Make sure they understand where they've arrived.
Let's all point them to Ben Cahill's serverless is a mindset, the blog post, because I think that captures the essence really well. That it's not just about specific technology, but it's about how you think about problem, how you go about solving those problems.
Yeah,
yes.
I definitely agree. Like that mindset shift is the biggest thing to do first, and then everything else kind of falls into place. Where how you just choose your platforms and services and all of that. And I think service is definitely getting easier. There's a lot more community content out there. I definitely think it's going to keep growing. One of the trends I like is actually I'm writing less Lambda and less code than ever before, purely because there's all these nice integrations that you can now build and write. And, the stream filtering is a good example of that. I can remove a bunch of if statements and case statements out of my Lambda functions. I think we're going to be moving to more functionless. I say functionless, but like basically the platform's providing more functionality, so we have to write less code. And I think it's going to get easier. I think there's still a journey to be had, though. Like service is still young. 6 years is young. So yeah, we'll get there. All right, what do you see?
It's been confusing too, right? Like the word itself has been confusing. I mean, I remember at Stackery, I mean, it just feels like there was just like always this retraining period that we were doing, consistently as new people kind of came in, where you're trying to re-educate and re-educate people. But I'm actually really excited about what I've been seeing with serverless and like the use of Lambdas, and the agility that it brings to, a bigger company. And I think that as we see more stories that will come out, that talk about that, I think that's kind of the thing that helps to get people excited. So for instance, like those Coca-Cola freestyle machines, right? During COVID, like there's those machines, you go up there and you push all the different flavors that you're going to want in your Coke. And, my kids used to make those like the green color because they push like every flavor. But during COVID, you're not able to do that, right? You can't touch the machine. So Coca-Cola was able to use Lambdas as a way to, you scan a QR code, pick your flavors. That would then trigger a Lambda function that said, make this. It would make the drink, and they were able to roll that out to 30,000 machines over the across the world and I think that was like proof of concept to in production in 100 days. And like, that's quick for a company of that size, right? Like to be able to move that quick and to be able to respond to unforeseen events to serve your customers, like that's the real power, right? Like just being able to move quickly when, when things get thrown at you that you weren't expecting.
Cool. Awesome. So I think we're coming up to our, we're wrapping up a bit. I think, Mike, you teach machine learning, AWS. Do you want to tell people where they can go and learn and see more of you? Okay, we can't hear you, Mike. You're on mute.
I haven't muted myself the entire time. We got away without that call the entire time. Anyway, yes. Thank you. Yes. At MikeGChambers.com. If you go there or search for me on social media with Mike G Chambers, then you'll find me. You'll find my staff. Come and join in what is turning to be a crazy party on YouTube of weird videos where I've recently, one of my favorite ones is I recreated the opening scene to Tron Legacy because I thought that was relevant to talking about Panorama. So we did that, and yeah, I'm not sure if it ultimately was, but I had fun doing it. So come and join the party.
Yeah, I'm a fan of your YouTube channel. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about the multitude of courses you've got coming up and where people can become serverless experts like yourself?
Yeah, so I guess the main place to go is it up here, homeschool.dev. So me and Anda, we're running a new course on the 10th, starting from 10th of January, where I'm going to teach you how to not just get started, but also really dive deep into some of the best practices for building serverless applications and how to write tests for them, how to build observability into the platform, and all that good stuff. So everything you need to really think about. I guess the boring side of serverless is all the how to do all the operational stuff, all the testing, all these other stuff you got to do, not just the fancy bit of writing some Lambda functions, because that's the easy part, right? And also got a video course called AppSync Masterclass as well. So that's where I think we're doing a lot of that functionless things that Ant's talking about, using AppSync to connect to DynamoDB tables and other things directly, and just sidestepping Lambda altogether as much as we can. So yeah, learn about AppSync and how to build a full stack Twitter clone, which is actually surprisingly feature rich. Taking a lot of time to do that, but yeah, I think the result is quite good so far.
Yeah, I think the production ready course is pretty useful because it covers everything you need to know. I see it as like getting your driver's license to build service apps that run in production. You'll learn a lot more once you're running stuff, but it's like it teaches you everything you need to know. And once you've done it, once you've built a few service apps, your knowledge will get deeper. But it gives you that kind of that blueprint and touches everything that you will need to know. So it's one course that covers everything. And obviously the homeschool thing it's completely mentored. So you have access to Yan, and you have any questions, and we do like weekly live Q&As, so you can ask Yan any questions. There's a Discord channel, you can chat with Yan at any point in time, so there's no getting stuck on the course and not being able to ask anyone a question. You've got access to one of the best serverless experts in the world, and me, if you have any issues. So yeah, I think that's it. Farah, do you any last words before you want to?
No, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for inviting me. I'm still tired. I don't have anything good to come back with, but I really appreciate you asking me to join on. It was fun to see you guys since I didn't get to see you at reInvent.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's say goodbye to everyone. Yeah, we'll hopefully next year there'll be more Serverless London user group stuff online, and hopefully at some point we can get back to in person. Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Ant. See you guys.